Hi, this is Mark. In this video, I'm going to cover ways to purge the mind of negativity, anxiety, toxicity, just anything that is causing the mind to, be overwhelmed or, be overconsumed or because a lot of times when you're in a panic situation, it's really where you're diverting your energy, where you're channeling the energy that's creating it to begin with. And, I'm just going to cover methods that have worked for me. Clearly, it's not going to be all the possibilities that exist, but I'm just, go over a few of them. To start, I think reading, reading a good story, depending on what it is. What do you like, fiction, nonfiction, fantasy? Any type of story is a way, or book uh, is a way to decompress and kind of allow your mind to focus, kind of be immersed in a story, or just be immersed in the activity itself, and it gets the mind away from the internalization of occurrences or situations that have previously occurred, which can funnel in, and depending on which way it's funneled, can create anxiety, could create negativity. Because a lot of times you just have to put in, you have to restore or put positive feedback into the mind and kind of purge out the negative. And if you just have already are in a negative state and you're just left alone in an empty room, it's very hard to eliminate depending on the severity. And finding ways to manage it is essential. And I think just it's easier over time. That's why generally wisdom can be built over time through experiences or learned experiences, because ultimately you fall. We always have mistakes. We always fall early on, and through each failure or attempt, the key is to bounce back and learn from that failure and not revert back into the cyclic pattern or loop, or and this a lot of times is inevitable, like depression. But the key is with depression, whether biological or linked to external circumstances, the best thing we can do is shape the mindset in such a way that we minimize the energy shifts that occur. If you overreact to a situation, you're creating an energy shift. You're creating future. You're sapping future energy. Basically, I like to think of it like there's always think of like every cycle. There's always a lag period, and this happens with life. If you're anxious during a period, like for instance, it could be over a span. Your health could be markers could be great, but not. Eventually you'll realize that in the future you're creating this. The extent of the damage is still translated even after the anxiety has been uh, compartmentalized, put away, put in the background. It's kind of out of the picture. But yeah, and I just think reading is an essential way to gain wisdom or just gain coping mechanisms, gain knowledge to deal with these situations and potentially mitigate them in the future. Because, but no, it's always a lot of these situations are inevitable. We have to approach them. We have to adapt to the environments. That's a way to succeed in life, is you have to overcome obstacles. And but it's always good to increase the strength of the mindset. Get in a positive state, release the stress. And books, reading is a very good way. Another good method is aerobic activity or exercise, and just because the mind is intricately connected to the body, you can't get around this. You could eat a very healthy diet, and I mean, sometimes the genetics could be very, very strong, but other times you decay because you're not exercising, you're not moving, because the blood flow, the circulation is critical. That's a pivotal has a pivotal role in our health, and just eating healthy is not enough to to the body is over time. It needs it needs our it needs to build up efficiency, and it needs we need to um, exercise in order to keep the organs moving and keep it running efficiently. And if we eat healthily without exercise, there's going to be a point with, I mean, it's not going to be immediate, but there will be decay. I mean, depending on the genetics, you're going to reach a point when you just start going downhill. And I found this very strong, there's this very strong um, link, with exercise and just mental health in general. I mean, when I was at my peak, physical and mental health, I mean, they coincided. Basically, my peak physical health coincided with my peak mental health. I was not as negative, more positive, because ultimately, when you feel good, when your mind is fluid, when it's running clear, and you have good oxygenation, and your body's running efficiently, you're able to do more. And it's a biofeedback process. It's a positive feedback process where you keep moving upward, you keep moving, and you keep moving. Of course, there's a limit, but that's just, I think, is just a key. It's finding ways to improve the health, the internal health of the system, and of course, uh, eating. You need to eat healthy as well if you implement exercise, and of course, with diet, the key is moderation. Just maintaining a balanced variety, varied diet, and moderating things, because I find that the human body can really operate very well under. It doesn't need so many calories. If the body's efficient, you can assimilate at high capacity, and therefore you don't need as many. In fact, you could eat a much lower calorie diet as long as it's quite nutrient dense, and you'll be able to sustain maintenance or build muscle than someone who consumes a very high calorie diet and they're imposing toxicity on the body. There's a certain demand that you have to, a fine line between the demand, depending on how much exercise is exerted, how much energy is exerted. That kind of gives you an indication of calorie intake, and you kind of have to. The key I find is awareness. The third thing is just method of relieving toxicity and stress is this contemplation, awareness, because if you imagine a scenario where your whole life, it's this partying, immersing in all these activities, pleasurable activities, and just saturating yourself in the external world, and just soaking in everything without second thought, without internalization of the external input, and just taking it in, and ultimately trying to gain the most reward signaling, which essentially would be attuned to, or you'd be very attuned to the external world, and kind of and therefore repress the internal workings of the mind. Of course, everyone's on the spectrum of internal, external, extrovert, introvert, and there's advantages and disadvantages, of course, depending on the scenario situation. But it's very important to contemplate and be aware, and maybe meditate, or just uh, get in a quiet place. I think it's good to, if you're in an area with a lot of sunlight, sunbathe, or just go outside, um, lie down. Um, you're soaking in the vitamin D. You're getting the vitamin D. You're getting the mental stimulation from the sun's rays. You're improving, health, immunity, hormones. Not only that, you can contemplate, relax, try to purge of the negative emotions, try to figure out what's causing it, the causation. Because ultimately with the causation, it's not necessarily, it's always going to be on a chain, and generally it's not. You could potentially link it to let's say a previous event that seemed not too distant, but in actuality it's very likely more distant, because the subconscious is very powerful. When you actually put in an input, or you're feeding it negative energy, um, it's reinforcing these thoughts, these patterns, and then it's causing them to recur. And a lot of times, like when life doesn't play out the way we want it, or in these circumstances, it's a lot of times pinpointed to what we're feeding in, and we don't exactly know the timeline, of course, it's very some people will be more attuned to the the past, but a lot of times it's very fractured. It's very it's not very clear exactly the cause or the exact cause. But if you go back and you can link it on a chain and just find or try to figure out um, what is creating the chain of all these events. Of course, it's not going to be perfect, but getting a little bit of awareness is better, than nothing. So it's always good to have some understanding, and then through time, as you actually implement this, it becomes easier and easier, and eventually insights actually become more frequent because we generally we become more efficient at what we invest energy in, and it kind of decays if we don't invest energy. So therefore, by being situated in this domain, it actually helps. It restores, helps feed the subconscious or helps kind of purge, all that negative energy over time, and essentially, um, at least work in that in a direction, like in a positive direction. And then there's other areas like I mentioned, reading. There's different domains, and I think just another important method is just try to immerse yourself in just activities or a variation of activities. I don't think it's good to be stuck in a you call it a rut, or just be kind of in this, how would I put it, cycle of routines that aren't changing, because ultimately our life, how it turns out, it's proportional to the extent of the environment, of course, that we situate ourselves into, but it's also proportional to the events within that environment that we are situated within, and also kind of the activity. So if you take a whole range and you get subsets and subsets, if you narrow it too far, you almost encapsulate the properties of that into the events. For instance, if you imagine yourself, you're in a room, you just have a calculator, and you have to perform calculations for the rest of your life. Now, let's just say this is a time we don't know, it's a time when we were developed, and you start operating, this is kind of like, when you're an accountant and you're doing a repetition of tasks. Not that accounting is repetition, but within a certain duty or a certain level, because there's different levels of accountants, and like depending on your position in the company, you may be in a position where you do a lot of repetition. And the same thing, if you do calculations over and over and over, and you're secluded from society, your brain is going to take on the properties of the calculator. Not like you're going to converge and become exactly like it, but essentially that's kind of what's happening with technology. We are taking the properties of the technology to an extent, the superficial properties, mainly. But if you go through that scenario, you're going to kind of become obviously very efficient at calculation, but you're going to become more deficient in other areas. It's going to decay slowly, until you fit the whatever areas of the brain that is basically signaled by that activity. So that's why it's always good to kind of diverge and adapt to different modes of different environments, because that kind of dictates success a lot of time, to having versatility, but also it allows the fear to kind of, sometimes we have to like face our fears to get rid of it. And to do so, you must do it progressively, or you don't want to just immediately jump into chaos, but you want to kind of, tend and, slowly progress, change, of course, if you have routines, like or that you're used to, you want to alter it at a certain rate, but not too fast, because, of course, anyone who likes routines, of course, there's a spectrum. There's some individuals are going to be more routine oriented, others are going to be more spontaneous. Spontaneity versus someone who's very, very orderly or very traditional. But there should be a good balance. You don't want to go to one extreme or the other. You got to find. So therefore, diverging at whatever's comfortable, and eventually that's going to lead to more opportunities because opportunities could exist anywhere along the globe that we aren't even aware of. If I were to translate somewhere in the globe, there's opportunities within that region, and I can just latch onto it. Of course, when you're optimistic, you actually will try latch onto these opportunities. When you're pessimistic, you close it off. So the opportunities are proportional to the mindset. Now, given that, it's also proportional to the extent, the area of observation, or the extent of influence. So by going down more different pathways, you're actually opening up more opportunities. But if you do it too fast, of course, depending on how fast you adapt, it's you need to find the balance there, where you're going at a rate that's proportional to how you operate. And what I mean by that is, someone uh, who's who likes change or likes novelty, or is very creative or always spontaneous. They're going to probably be more open to that. Um, because again, it just depends on the traits. And a lot of these traits depend on how uh, development, how our minds are operating, and of course, based on how our minds operate, it dictates kind of where we situate ourselves, which areas we gravitate, depending on interest, and that kind of reinforces uh, this whole like the domain of all these the possibilities that we open up essentially. Because but the key, I think, is we need a change, but change has to occur. We need it continuously. Whether we try to change our mindset for the better, change our routines, our lifestyle for the better, uh, adopt, different activities, different interests. Just seek, novelty because, it opens up more doors and, more opportunities. You cross paths with people or individuals with like interests, and then you share more information, you gain more knowledge. Because if we truly live in a very small world, and just being in the confines of your own mind is very, very, very small. But then it's potentiated when you're able to take ideas and bounce off of other ideas, and then it creates an explosion of new ideas, and this creates more opportunities. So to do so, there has to be movement, and it has to be some action. And so yeah, I always think it's good to kind of vary, be adaptable and try to reinforce that adaptability to different environments and change. The circumstances. Don't try to live in a cyclic pattern or loop where you're doing the same thing over and over, because that's kind of decompressing other areas that could be possibilities, other opportunities that may manifest. But yeah, those four areas, that I think that are critical in terms of, keeping the mind, trying to get in a good position. Of course, it's what you feed inside the mind, what matters. And evidently with the politics and the situation today, there's a lot of negativity, and, but it's, yeah, the thing is with negativity, we can transform negativity into positivity. And that's why, it exists. We need that negativity, but we have to be able to resist it and overcome the hurdle. And eventually, a lot of times when you don't realize it until you encounter the negative, it's so easy to be in this one state until you encounter it, kind of wakes you up. So that's what I find. It's always, I think, good to be skeptical, and but not be overly. I think it's not, the push everyone, because ultimately we're all going to have our own opinions, our own judgments, and that's just an inevitable situation. Depending on where we grew up, culture, and just imagine all the cultures that are funneling into the U.S. It's creating a almost like chaos, because ultimately when cultures come in at such a fast rate, faster than the ability to rate that such a rate of adaptation, our ability to adapt to those circumstances, it kind of creates an initial chaos. And sometimes that chaos can manifest with paranoia, negativity, and all this other energy, negative energy. But eventually, it does, become. We learn from it and we move on. This has always been the cycle. So I always think, yeah, just uh, take it head on, and try to find ways to manage and resist negative energy, and note that it is inevitable, and it's gonna, we're always gonna encounter it, and just yeah, that's all I have, and hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.